Hey guys, welcome back to more homeowner association stories. In this video, a crazy HOA banned barbecues, so I got revenge by hosting a 100 people barbecue party. So I have been a homeowner for a while now, over a decade in my current home. I thought that meant all the growing pains with the surrounding community would be through and done with, left behind to the tedious and awkward past. Well, I live on the boundary line between two neighborhoods, which is not always a big deal, but has become one recently. My neighborhood has no central regulation except for a non-existent neighborhood watch, thanks to signs put up 15 years ago and promptly forgotten about. The next neighborhood over, however, has an HOA. This is not an outright horrible thing by any means. For quite a few years this meant nothing to me, except that I would occasionally wave to some people inspecting the fence lines and yards of the adjacent properties. When the management changed about 6 years ago though, drama started unfolding. Mumblings of discontent came with the change. I heard my friends gripe and figured it was just the common complaints that come with changes in management. I very quickly learned that it was much more than that. The new management was enforcing everything they could to try to justify from the precise wording of the contracts. They had fines associated with the height that the grass was cut, as well as the days of the week that you cut your grass and the days between cutting grass. To stick to the topic of mowing though, you had to get approval from the HOA to hire someone to mow your yard, so don't think that you are gonna get your little nephew to mow while you are out of town. Because of course, ripe stars, we all know you need to get some overpriced idiot to mow your lawn that was pre-approved by the HOA, and they probably pocket a nice change. Anyway, it was like this with everything that affected the overall appearance and reputation of the neighborhood. Or everything that they could make sound like it affected that with their strange self-serving logic. A lot of people who could manage it with their finances and personal/professional life just started moving away. I had multiple friends that it is much harder to stay in touch with now because they live across the city. It was either that or live with tyrants. They managed to keep the houses filled with people who were either too gullible or boring to push back against a clear oppression. And as comes with idiots in power, they begin to spread their power as wide as they can possibly stretch it, consequences be damned. They started slowly to creep in by claiming a need to look at the property boundaries from our sides of the fence to fully ensure everything is up to code. I never let them on my property no matter how much they bugged me, and called the cops once or twice when they showed up anyways. These calls never came to anything, and they must have decided that I was not worth the trouble when so many other homeowners outside of their jurisdiction started to let them walk all over them. A couple years of this behavior led us to the state things are in for the start of our story. Most people who shared the property line with the HOA had capitulated. They were not fully under the thumb of the HOA, but they made it clear that they would give in rather than make an issue of it, even when it led to problems down the line. I'm pretty much convinced the HOA was looking to encroach even further on my neighborhood, but wanted to deal with the last few holdouts first. So then they targeted us specifically. I'm a huge fan of hosting social gatherings. I've done block parties, barbecues, neighborhood yard sales, and any other variation. It is why I have so many friends in my neighborhood and the adjacent one. It creates really bright living environments in my experience, and I grew up in a very active neighborhood, so it's just inseparable from how I feel comfortable living. The homeowner association knew this, of course. Many of them had been invited and even attended events in the past. When I woke up one morning with flyers on every door in my neighborhood and signs even posted in certain yards that outdoor cooking and eating was banned from this point on, I was decidedly done with their BS. They claimed it was to preserve property values and prevent unpleasant smells, but it was obviously to finally force me to acknowledge them somehow. I decided to do the opposite. I didn't storm into an HOA meeting and demand an explanation or cede to their demands. No, instead I invited over 100 people to a barbecue. The logistics were difficult enough, but I had skill with these kind of events, and I also recruited some of my family members to help. Those are the people who created wonderful memories and built my love of large social gatherings. They are really perfect for fighting back against this petty HOA. Suffice it to say, even with all the help I could get, it was a nightmare to plan. I was convinced it would fail at the first sign of conflict. I invited everyone in both neighborhoods, anyone who had been terrorized by the HOA in the past, and plenty of other friends and neighbors. Ultimately, these are the people I'm most grateful to. The day came, and before long we had a group of our fence watchers standing at the edge of my yard looking in on me and my dad starting up the grills and people collecting. The HOA came to me after taking a bit of time determining what they would do about this brash disobedience. "OP, what is this?" I replied, "That's a barbecue. I forgot to mail your invite ahead of time, but I made sure to leave it on your door this morning because of my mistake. You guys don't even have to worry about contributing, just enjoy. We put a ban on outdoor cooking on the properties we manage. The notification was put on your door only a week ago. This is disrespectful. Luckily, I'm not on a property that you manage." The rest of the conversation from there was not really that productive, so I'll skip it. Ultimately though, it ended with them threatening me with taking my property, and when I mentioned that they have no legal grounds to do such a thing, they floundered a bit, threatened more and more strange consequences, and then they stormed off in a huff. When the police showed up at the barbecue, they were quick to see that there was no fault with the event I was doing. They really enjoyed the burgers and hot dogs we offered them, but I knew they wouldn't be able to drink the beers we had on hand for them. The initial call was dealt with easily enough. It was a clear sign of their belligerent stupidity that they even called them once. A short while later, we ended up visited by them again, but this was after their shift was over and they took us up on those beers. They also told us about the noise complaints that kept pouring in after the initial call and how the police had to threaten to file harassment against the HOA if the false claims continued. Of course, I had my own funny story to tell them. When they realized the cops were not gonna do a whole lot of good for their petty complaints, the HOA decided to take things into their own hands. And once again, they found a way to prove their stupidity even further. A group of the HOA distracted me and the other grill cooks, while a few more who had snuck into the barbecue and got close to the grills. The ones at my fence were painting and plastering their public cooking bans all over my fence. The ones at my grills tipped them over and dumped charcoal everywhere. I'm just glad I noticed in time to run back and seal the propane tanks for the grills that used them before things could go very poorly. The policeman then asked if I wanted to press charges. I told them, sure, why not? I got everything I wanted out of the barbecue, a great event that over 100 people enjoyed, a reason to replace the crappy fence that I had no love for, and definitive proof of the power-hungry hubris of the HOA leaders. The HOA leaders had not even brought my barbecue to an end with their tantrum. The community finally came together after seeing how the HOA behaved at the barbecue and worked through safeguards in the HOA contracts to finally uproot the corrupt leaders of the HOA. They did not fully dissolve it, but as of right now it is run much leaner by just a few individuals who have added clauses to the contract to limit the micromanaging that the HOA can do and to offer ways for the community to push back easier. It took some time for all these changes to be implemented, but it all started with my barbecue, and I am proud of that. Also, those cops come by for my barbecues whenever they can find the excuse now, and at least once a year I try to organize a neighborhood-wide barbecue to keep a good tradition going. And by the way, in case you were wondering, of course these HOA jerks had to pay me for my ruined fence. I did not just let them get away. As I said, I pressed charges, but I don't want to bore you with the legal drama. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I gotta say that is a pretty creative way of getting revenge on the HOA. And I must say, props to OP for handling the situation like this. Either way, the next one is titled, "They Tried to Rip Me Off, but I Won at the End," and it's a story from r/malicious compliance. And by the way, if you haven't already, please don't forget to like the video and maybe even subscribe to the channel if you don't want to miss any of my fantastic daily uploads. So this happened about 17 years ago in a major city in the very south of the Netherlands with a Renault dealership. And by the way, I think in Europe we would pronounce it Renault, which is the French way, but I suppose in American English you would say Renault. Anyway, so I had a new job and we needed a second car. We bought a new Twingo, a car that went for about 12,000 euros, or I guess around $13,000 to $14,000, and there were two stipulations in the contract when we bought the car. Number one was that we had to get financing through Renault, and number two was that 3 years maintenance was included. We financed a minor part for 3 years at 0% interest, and after the first year I took the car for its first service. I had about 12,000 kilometers on the odometer. When I dropped the car off, I was asked if there was anything that needed attention. I think I answered something like, "Do whatever you need to do." In the late afternoon, when I picked up the car, 3 rather bulky men were standing behind the service desk. I remember they were really focused on me when I was presented with the bill. The bill was for about 1,000 euros, and for a 1-year-old car with just 12,000 kilometers. I immediately understood what had happened. They must have figured out that they could inflate the bill with all kinds of nonsense maintenance actions, since I gave them carte blanche, and to avoid any troubles they made sure that I could be intimidated by them being with 3 people. And by the way, this is pretty surprising for a Renault dealership. Or maybe it's an outside mechanic or something, maybe I confused something. Either way, I just very friendly asked for my car keys. But you have to pay first. No, I don't. Please, may I have my car keys? Instead of enlightening them straight away, I kept going like this for a bit longer. When things started to get a bit unfriendly, I reminded the rep that I had bought the car at this dealership, including 3 years of maintenance. All 3 guys turned a few shades lighter, frantically searching for the contract, whispering, moving away to the office out of earshot. It took about 10 minutes before the rep came back out and handed me my keys. I ended up getting its 3rd service just before the 3 years had elapsed, and as soon as I got the title to the car, I traded it in for a car of a different brand. And as you would expect, the bill for the 2nd and 3rd services was less than 300 to 400 euros. Not sure if this is the right subreddit, but the compliance part is that did everything they were supposed to do and way more, and I complied as well by reminding them that they were responsible for all costs. And yeah, ripe stars, honestly, that is one of the things I don't like about car ownership in Western countries. The repairs can be insanely expensive, and that is one of the best things about Thailand. Service in general here is so cheap, and especially for motorcycles and cars. I remember hearing back in Europe there were some places that charged like several hundreds of dollars for an oil change. Meanwhile, you can get that done for like 20 to 30 bucks here in Thailand. Sometimes even at the official dealership. Anyway, the next one is another malicious compliance story. So I've been a mechanic my entire working life so far, and this is one of my favorite experiences. I had a customer come in complaining about a vibration. I put the vehicle on the lift and checked the front end. I found a nearly broken tie rod and a faulty rack and pinion, so basically the passenger side front wheel was not fully secured to the steering system and would soon break and cause the wheel to be completely disconnected from the steering. I told the customer how much the repair would be and told her it was unsafe to drive. She asked me to put it back together so she could leave. I told her that I could not do that because if it broke after I let her leave, I could be held liable. She then started yelling and screaming about calling the cops and suing me, and how her cousin's brother knows a guy who's related to the chief of police and I'll be arrested. She then calls the police and they come out. I show the officers the vehicle and they understood the safety concern. They told me to just put the car down and let her leave. I did, and even made her sign a statement declining crucial safety repairs. She left with the most "Ha, I told you so" smug grin on her face. Until she left the property, got pulled over, and her car got impounded. They also gave her a ticket for reckless driving. I was so happy seeing her car getting towed. Edit, the cops told her it was against the law to drive it. The state laws back then allowed me to do exactly what I did. I offered to discount the price of the repairs and take payments, but she still refused. And I don't care how well versed you think you are in the law, you don't know when or where this took place. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. My neighbor is a proper Christian lady and a huge busybody. She was my friend on Facebook and had been for years because she is also the president of our HOA and shares info on her page, which I liked having access to. A couple of years ago, I was asked to moderate a relatively large Facebook group, so I changed my Facebook name from my legal name to first name middle name, Sally Joe, as opposed to Sally Joe Smith. Well, PCL saw me at the park not too long after and asked why I had changed my Facebook name. I did not give her an answer. She asked me no less than 4 times over the following weeks, finally cornering me at the grocery store saying, "Well, are you ever gonna tell me why you changed your Facebook name?" I'd had enough, so I flatly said, "I joined a swingers group and I've started meeting people on Facebook for no strings attached adult fun. I was concerned about someone learning my identity and stalking me, so I decided to remove my last name for security." She blushed a color I'd never seen before and just walked away. It was glorious, and a week later, I noticed we were no longer Facebook friends. And the next one is another satisfying revenge story. So I rent a house with my husband and 2 of our friends. It's a 5-bedroom house. Rent is outrageous in our area, $2,400 for a 1-bedroom apartment. So we found this house for $3,000, not a bad deal while we save up to buy a house. There are other houses in the neighborhood like this, as well as our next door neighbors. Their house is a 5-bedroom house and they have 9 people living in their house. So it's chaos all over there all the time. In our neighborhood we can choose the trash company, so it just so happens that we have the same trash company as the next door neighbors. Our trash company does like us to have the trash out by 7 AM, so we don't always get it out that early though, and that's where the problem started. Most of the time they don't pick up our trash until 11, so obviously as long as the trash is out before trash pickup gets here, they can take our trash. The people next door have 3 trash cans and they are overflowing every single week. They put their trash out the night before, but unfortunately, our neighborhood has raccoons and foxes, so the trash is always getting into, and last time a raccoon got into their trash. It left a mess in our yard and they wouldn't pick it up. I was pretty pissed about it, but I just let it go, cleaned up their trash. I did go and put it back in their trash can and they just sat out front glaring at me while I did that. Here is where this incident started. A couple weeks ago, I didn't get our trash out until almost 9 AM. All 4 of us were sick with the virus and I was on the mend and feeling a little bit better, but I slept in and forgot to put the trash at 7 AM. So I go to put the trash out and my neighbor starts yelling at me saying, "You were supposed to have your trash out by 7 AM. You cannot put your trash out now." I said, "Well, they haven't come yet and pick up the trash because your trash cans are full, so it's not a big deal." He said, "No, that's the rules. Your trash has to be out by 7 AM. If it's not, you cannot get your trash picked up this week." I said I understand that they want the trash out by 7 AM, but they haven't come and picked it up yet, so it doesn't matter. So I went ahead and I just walked inside. I went back to bed and a couple of hours later I get up to see that our trash can was put to the side of the house and they were still full of trash. So that means that someone moved our trash can. Our other neighbor came up to me the next day and said that she saw him put our trash can back. She did not know the situation, so she wasn't going to butt in and tell him not to do that. Our neighbors are also very proud about their last name. They literally have a flag in their front window with their last name, so I called the trash company and I said that I was Mrs. So-and-so and I needed to set up a vacation hold for our upcoming pickup. They said no problem, we won't pick up your trash next week. They legit only asked for the address, no other information. The next week I made sure that our trash was out at 6:45 AM and then I sat and watched for the trash truck and I watched them come past the house. They drove past my neighbor's house, didn't pick up their trash even though their trash was overflowing, picked up ours and the other few people who also have them and left. I know I'm an a-hole for doing this, you don't need to tell me, I may have crossed the line. But the point is, he also crossed the line by touching our cans and moving them and setting foot on our property. Either way, the next one is another HOA story and it is titled Dad vs HOA. So I'm a little fuzzy on exactly when this was, but for loose context, it's about 2018-ish. So we are living in this little 2-story in a subdivision in upstate South Carolina, which my parents still own. My family just had a full run of renovations done on the house, kitchen remodel, new floors, wallpaper removed, new paint on the walls, etc. The folks who painted did an especially good job. Since they were a small local business, they wanted to know if they could put a little sign in our yard for a few days as advertisement. You know, those little plastic type yard signs, nothing big or fancy. My dad was happy to oblige and showed them where to put it to avoid the sprinkler system. Everything's great, but 2 days later a letter arrives in our mailbox. It's from the HOA, Homeowners Association. According to the bylaws, no signage can be placed in a yard for more than 24 hours. We had not been planning to leave it up for more than a few days, maybe a week at most, but to be told that supporting a small business was an eyesore came well out of left field. This is the part where I tell you that my father, despite being a very considerate and respectful man, has something of a problem with authority, especially when that authority is arbitrarily telling him what to do on his own property. First thing he does is pull out his copy of the neighborhood bylaws. He and my mother both look over it and lo and behold, the quoted passage does indeed state that no signage or similar mode of advertisement is to be displayed in a yard for more than 24 hours. Not one to go down quietly, my father took to combing through the applicable section looking for any loophole he could find. And he found it in the word yard. 2 or 3 days after that, one of the ladies who work for the HOA came down to our house to personally ask us to remove the sign. She and my dad stepped out on the front porch and must have been out there for nearly half an hour. I don't think I heard him say anything other than the occasional or yes ma'am until the very end. See, the sign was no longer in our yard, it was in the flower bed. Other parts of the bylaws, even in the cited section, distinguish the flower bed as separate from the yard, and since this particular clause mentioned the yard alone, the flower bed must have been fair game. And he told this honestly quite nice woman as much, without so much as knitting his brows or raising his voice. The sign stayed in our flower bed, perhaps out of spite, for nearly another month before we finally took it down. And yeah, ripe stars, that is how you get revenge in an HOA neighborhood. And the next one is titled HOA Goat Story. So I, 30 male, hate cutting grass. I hate it. The sound of the lawnmower makes me wish I could take my ears off like Mr. Potato Head and lock them in a box. It hurts my shoulder. I got injured in high school and it never healed right, and I might be the only person in the world who doesn't like the smell of cut grass and gasoline. This week was the very first week this year that I would need to cut the grass. We live in a fairly warm state and the HOA is very strict about it. We even got little flags at the front of the yard that the grass is not allowed to get taller than. So the point is, the lawn needs to be mowed. I don't want to do it, my wife cannot, because the last time she mowed the lawn, she tipped into a lake. It just so happens that I know a guy who owns a goat and I offer him 20 bucks to bring it over to eat the grass for me. The goat eats the grass, we keep her away from the neighbor's yards, goat goes home. It was great, way better than mowing. Except now my wife is mad because some of the neighbors saw the goat and think it's hysterical that we had a goat doing yard work for us. She is pissed that I made us look like weird hicks in front of all her friends. I don't care if they think we're a little weird, I'm happy to be laughed at if it means saving myself from the headache-inducing sound of a lawnmower. But now she is making weird comments around the house about getting a horse to carry groceries or a chicken to clean the windows since there's no man in the house who can. I didn't expect her to react so negatively to a goat, but maybe I'm missing something. So, was I an a-hole? And yeah, ripe stars, let me know in the comments what you think about this. Do you think that OP is the a-hole for this or not? And ripe stars, I would say that OP is definitely not the a-hole for doing this. I would say it's a pretty smart way of handling the issue of not wanting to cut grass. And if the wife is so upset by it, then she can just do it herself. Anyway, the comments on Reddit said, not the a-hole, and your wife is wrong anyway. It's not a hick thing, there are entire businesses built around renting goats for yard care, especially to clear out brush. It's actually quite trendy. Comment number 2, not the a-hole. Also, it's funny how your wife went straight to attacking your masculinity. That's straight up abusive and toxic as hell. Comment number 3, she tipped into a lake? What? Gonna need to elaborate on that one. Anyway, moving on to the subject at hand, having a goat mow your lawn is an absolutely genius move. And I applaud you for it. You had a problem and came up with a solution that evidently works. If your wife doesn't like it, she can do something about it. You are not the a-hole. And now an update to the story, the goat does not violate HOA BS policies. And yeah guys, if you cannot get enough of my content, please don't forget to check out my podcast by searching for Ripe Stories on all major podcast platforms such as Spotify, Apple or Google Podcasts. Furthermore, you can find bonus content by going to patreon.com/ripeyoutube or by clicking the join button here on YouTube. For a small monthly fee, you will get access to dozens and dozens of exclusive videos you won't find anywhere else. Thank you so much for watching and I hope to see you again tomorrow.